So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today in our webinar with KeyPay and EmployeeConnect. So my name is Kate Brown and I'm KeyPay's Marketing Manager, dialing in from the Sydney office today. So on the webinar we also have Dean Micallef from EmployeeConnect. Hey Dean. And we have Xanthe Simpson from KeyPay. Hey Xanthe.
Hello.
So Xanthe and Dean's roles both focus on supporting clients in the technology implementation journey and ensuring that those clients have the most seamless experience possible. So they're both well versed on implementations, and hopefully this morning you'll be able to rack their brains on their experiences and get some tips on managing change and also communicating that change to employees. So First off, just let you guys know that we have some time at the end for questions, and we also will be recording the session today. So if you miss anything or if you need to drop off early, then don't worry, we'll share that with you afterwards. So let's kick off. So Dean, would you like to start by introducing yourself and telling us a bit about yourself and your role at EmployeeConnect?
Yeah, no worries. Hey everyone. So again, I'm Dean and I'm working at EmployeeConnect. My official title at EmployeeConnect is a business analyst, but being a smaller organisation, we all kind of wear a lot of hats in the company. But the main crux of my role is really being that middleman between our internal development team and our clientele. Obviously, our internal team being really technical, being a technology company, and our clientele being people like HR and payroll managers, which usually aren't necessarily technical people, but people. And my role kind of is there to translate from people A to people B and kind of make that success happen. So it's project managing as well, training and educating clients, helping them through that process, project managing and make sure everything goes on time. And again, just making sure everyone is on the right page. A little bit about me, I like socks. So odd socks are cool or wacky socks are cool. I'm a bit of a Harry Potter nerd. I'm a proper nerd as well. And I enjoy to kind of get outside when I can on the weekend, being an office worker.
Awesome, Dean. Thanks. It's great to have you on the webinar today. And Xanthe, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself and your role at KeyPay?
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Xanthe and I manage the customer experience team here at KeyPay. And this is looking after the business areas of implementations, compliance and training. I have worked on and off for KeyPay for the last 3 years in between other projects, and I've been working in around the payroll space for over 15 years, and I have a passion for it. I guess when I say in and around, implementations is part of the around of payroll. However, it's the customer interactions that really drives the passion for me. I am a problem solver. Yes, I love jigsaw puzzles. And for me, the feel-good moments on the job are when you have found solutions that make the customer's job easier. For me, implementations became part of my job script as I really wanted to understand the why and how a system works, not just the process. Working in the field of implementations has enabled me to keep challenging myself. I am a massive foodie and like to think of myself as a wine buff, and have set myself a goal of trying to visit as many cake shops in Australia as I can to hopefully find the ultimate dream Moorish cake, and of course without having to bake it myself.
Unfortunately, the webinar isn't about cakes today, but it's good. So Xanthe, it's clear that you know implementations really well and what it takes to create that success with your clients. So I'd like to start off by getting your stance on change management and whether you think it's critical to a successful implementation.
Yeah. Okay, so a change management process and sometimes even a committee is essential to the success when implementing new technology, as it ultimately supports and ensures the transition is achieved. Through a well thought out change management strategy, you'll be able to plan, identify and tackle any resistance to the new technology from your key stakeholders and the employees, so essentially the users. So there's usually a thought that change management has a cycle that parties involved in the process will go through, and your communication method, style, and also frequency will most likely be different depending on the stage of the change management cycle these parties are at. So for example, you may have a group who are still in denial of the change and others that are already championing the change. Those in denial are still need to explore their emotions of perhaps losing something and may not want to engage in a discussion, whilst the other group is keen to embrace the improvements. I believe that a lot of businesses don't do change management well. And for those businesses that do engage in a change management process, they are usually faced with their users processing the change at different stages through the cycle. And if you're not prepared as the implementations coordinator, then you may have an unsuccessful or prolonged implementation.
That makes sense. Change management is obviously a difficult topic, and I can understand there'd be a lot of obstacles in the way that you need to be prepared for. So in your opinion, what would you say is the most important focus area to ensure the success of that implementation then?
Yeah, so for the implementations we do at KeyPay, preparation and planning is key. Your planning will most likely start with something like you may call it a work breakdown structure or a scoping document, which should build the foundations for your project plan. Perhaps you have risk assessments and your communications plan. Telling people about a change or transition is not enough, and the plan should detail how you will motivate the individual to adopt the new technology and to apply their energy in learning and changing how they do things. And I guess to do this, they need to understand why the new technology is important to them and how it will positively impact their work. And why is planning key? Well, let's think about a scenario where the team sets a go live date for the new technology to be up and running. However, the plan didn't detail when the training in the new system was going to take place. So essentially, the users have not been trained because you forgot to communicate when the training was being held. So I guess the outcome could be that the go live date is then most likely pushed out. The majority of your planning will take place before you begin the delivery of your implementation. However, planning activities will be ongoing throughout, most likely during any change processes which may occur through that.
So planning is key. I know that you're good at planning, Xanthi, so I'm sure that we're going to get some good tips from you today. So Dean, I'd love to get your view and what do you think is the most important focus for technology implementations?
Yeah, I think similar to what Xanthi's saying there, that obviously having a plan is really, really important, but I think it's also really important to involve people as early as you can in that stage. I think that no one genuinely likes change in general. And I think that the earlier you make that aware that that's happening and you involve your people in that, I think that's a little bit more digestible and easier to kind of get on board with, rather than being told 2 minutes before something is happening that it's happening. And coming back to what Xanthi's saying now, I think it's really important to include people on the why, not necessarily just the what. So kind of explaining that, hey, we're moving to this system, or it doesn't have to be a system necessarily, right? But this is why we think that this is important and why we're moving forward. And I think involving your people in that process, I think a really good example of that might be that if you're changing something, especially in a workplace context, is involving your people in kind of researching on what's the best thing to change to. I think that's a really good way of kind of flipping things on its head, rather than having that top-down approach and kind of involving things and making things kind of more democratic. So I think that's really, really important as well.
Yeah, I think Xanthi makes a good point that first and foremost, planning is vital to get that project done. But if you don't have the people on board to be a part of it and actually make it work, then it's not going to be a success. So that's a very good point. So from your experience in implementations, and obviously you have quite a focus on employee engagement, what are the risks of not involving employees during that process?
Well, I think the biggest risk is that people just don't want to get on board and they drag their heels. And that can be really, really difficult. You may have, or I've worked on projects where the system is great and it's a perfect fit for the business, but from that change management point of view, if people aren't on board, that can be a nightmare sometimes. So I think, again, it's kind of making sure that kind of, you're involving people and kind of getting feedback from them, iterating as you go. But definitely kind of bringing them on for the journey early and often, because I think the biggest risk is that you might have people that kind of will do everything in their power to not change or not get on board. Yeah,
it's funny, I think in business we always talk about changing for the good and transforming your ways of working, but I think as humans we just tend to resist change.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, getting on board early and sort of I suppose showing the benefits of what that change could be is a great way to get that message clear. So Xanthe, coming back to the planning side of things, what would you say the key stages are during an implementation?
Yeah, so I find to start with a scoping meeting with all relevant stakeholders sets your implementation up for success. This is when you can really clarify details and deliverables based on the scoping documents and initial sales meetings that would have occurred, and gives you a clearer picture to be able to construct your plan based on likely costs and timeframes through your discussions in the meeting. It also gives you a chance to ask those questions where you are most likely to find your hidden surprises in the scope of the business that may impact your costs and scheduled timeline. So the outcome should be that you have all the information on the work that is required to complete your implementation successfully and to gain what we call acceptance, understanding, and agreement with your client. So after the scoping, you can then create your project plan, or you should be able to, and your workflow. Now, it doesn't have to be an elaborate plan. However, this will depend on the scope of the implementation and should be relative to the size of your implementation. But the plan should at the very least detail milestones, due dates, scope of works mapped out, risks, costs, and the critical path. So that's essentially the schedule of tasks that needs to be followed in order to meet the deadline set and implementation go live dates. Involved in that plan should also be your communication plan. Again, does not need to be elaborate. However, it should detail when communications are to take place and in what method of delivery. So once you have your plan, you are ready to execute and deliver your scope of works. Training is also a key stage of the implementations process. It's really important that you give your employees and users the tools to learn a new system. Not all employees will learn at the same rate or in the same way. Something to be aware of that I have seen is employees are sometimes resistant to change because they think they haven't had enough training and therefore not as confident in the new technology and processes. But that's probably because they've been using the old system for the last 20 years. And the last key stage is the user acceptance testing, or UAT. Okay, so it could also be known as payroll data tests, and it's vital to give you the assurance that the implementation was successful. So when we talked about training resistance, you can also help those employees by using hands-on UAT. So specifically, they could be doing the testing for you so that they get familiar with that technology, new technology as well. And they can also understand and appreciate that this is going to provide improvement opportunities.
That's a really good idea, actually providing sort of empowering employees to test the product and have confidence in it rather than just hitting them with training at the last minute. So that's another thing to do that. So I think you sort of touched in your planning that it's important to plan in that stage of training employees and helping them gain confidence in the technology. So Dean, I'd like to know at what point in that implementation should you engage employees?
Yeah, really good question. And I think the simple answer to that is early and often. Involve people as early as you can. I think that that's going to be the best path to success. And I think that something that's really intriguing as well is that kind of sometimes the brightest ideas or the most inspiring come from the quietest voice in the room. But, if you had two people in the whole company making decisions for everyone, then you don't get those. So they're little gems that you get from your people, right? Because it's people that make up your company. So I think it's really important to involve people early and often. I think you get more ideas. You eliminate errors because, again, you've got more people thinking about things. You bring people on board. And coming back to what Xanthi was saying there with kind of involving clients in UAT, it also helps you appreciate kind of how huge the journey was to get to kind of go live. So you have people appreciate that rather than involving them right at the end and then someone focuses on one small thing that went wrong. But having that context, that this was a really large process and a lot of time and effort and work went into this. And sometimes things aren't perfect, but kind of knowing kind of that journey and where it began to have that context. So I think early and often is the answer there.
Nice. And do you have any tips for someone that might be implementing a new technology on how to communicate to employees in a more interesting way?
Yeah, absolutely. I have one golden tip that works for every client and every industry and everyone, and that's snacks. People love snacks. Cake, if you're going to be part of that, I'll bring cake. But I think, ironically, not jokes aside, I think it's important to kind of educate and train and involve people in different ways. I know that I'm very visual and kinesthetic. I need to do things to understand how they work or see them. So kind of reading a manual kind of wouldn't help me too much. So it's understanding your people, and I think that will guide you on how to involve them. You can do things like interactive webinars, like what we're doing right now. You can use like what's called click-through or walk-through software, where it guides users on where to go in an application and kind of help them digitally on board. You've got other applications, interactive manuals, things that have kind of sometimes like audio as well as video. Lunch and learns are great as well. So kind of having that nice physical sit-down presence of kind of chatting to people, having a bit of a nibble or a drink, and a bit of a discussion. So again, I think it's kind of catering to your people and kind of avoiding the generic, here's something and read it and you'll be good.
So you've mentioned a lot of things that involve food there, which I'm not going to... I'm pretty happy with that. I think my experience as an employee learning a new system or technology, I've always found it easier when it's gamified and just it's a bit more interactive and you get some sort of, I don't know, like a point system or something that you get praised for at the end. For me, that works. I'm not very good with just people talking at me or having to read through something. I think we do have, we have quite short attention spans now. I think people say that humans have about 10 seconds attention span, so it's definitely good to make it interactive. Awesome. So we've talked a lot about best practice for success, but I'd like to know, I'll ask Xanthi this question, where do you think businesses can go wrong with an implementation, and how would you avoid starting off on the wrong foot?
Yeah, so I think early on I spoke about planning. So I guess preparation and any potential risk identification will really avoid starting off on the wrong foot. A simple risk could be, for example, one of your resources on the implementations team is on leave during a critical part of the delivery of the work for the client. So what plans have you in place to overcome this risk, which could potentially throw out the implementation or agreed go live date? So something to be aware of. In relation to employee engagement, begin with honest, convincing discussions. The more you talk about the change, the more discussion, the more concern, resistance will be realised to then overcome sooner. An example, I had a client and he was the manager and he was implementing KeyPay as their new payroll software for his business. And he was telling me that he was very prepared for the change discussion. And so he organised a meeting with all his payroll team to then enable discussions and answer any questions or concerns they had. He said the meeting went well and they spent all afternoon talking about the change and all the impacts and timelines. He said they all walked out positive and ready to go, which is great, okay? But what happened was a week later, he heard a lot of chatter that the team wasn't really happy with the change and they had more concerns. And the concerns were things he already addressed in the meeting. So he was frustrated and confused, and he was talking to me going, where did I go wrong? I've given them all the time. I talked to them. And the thing is you need to communicate the change frequently and powerfully. One communication, no matter how positive it was, is not going to be enough, as the team needed time to also process that change, not just in one afternoon. The manager needs to really empower his team and identify change champions who can also help influence the rest of the team.
Yeah, I like your thoughts on the change champion thing. I know we do that at KeyPay. We have our payroll champions as well that sort of they're trained up in the product, and they're sort of actively driving that training as well. So Dean, let's ask the same question but reverse it. Do you have any examples of times when an implementation has gone well, and why did they go well?
Yeah, again, good question. I think it comes back to kind of things that we've been talking about already. Is I think implementations that I've seen go really, really well have had a decent sized team on something, rather than just having one person kind of own that and kind of not share that knowledge with the business. Implementations that have gone well have announced that to the organisation and made that aware at the beginning. They've had a really good plan, like Xanthi has said. We've mitigated risk. A really good one, Xanthi, is your point is spot on, is when people are on leave and you don't accommodate for that, and it affects that critical path. So I think the best examples I have is where staff have been trained adequately, they've been involved in the entire process, they've had input on the project, and they've been able to change the way that project happens or the way that the system is rolled out. Because again, your client is going to know their business better than you do, right? So I think that's really, really important. The best examples I can think of is people being involved early and often and being educated and kind of coming along for the ride rather than kind of just being told at the end.
Yeah, I think there's a key theme with both of your answers there, and it's sort of focusing on commitment and maintaining momentum throughout the process, and not just communicating once and hoping that that's enough. It's about keeping that connection going. So Dean, would you have any suggestions for tools that could help you along the way, or how would you measure success with those tools?
Yeah, I think, again, good point is that success is both objective and subjective, right? I think if we talk about KeyPay and if we focus on payroll, right? I mean, success is payroll being run correctly without any errors, right? That's just black and white. But at the same time, people might not be happy with the system or the way that it's rolled out, and that's subjective. So I think that you can use tools to give you kind of black and white answers, and they're things like NPS or CSAT, like customer satisfaction, and you can poll your staff, and you can kind of get some black and white answers there. And then I think you can kind of touch on more of those subjective areas, and that's kind of sitting your team down and having a retrospective, kind of how did things go? What did you think? What are things that we could have done differently? And that will help kind of strengthen that bond with your team for the next time that change comes along. So I think, again, you can use tech to help you, which is great. And I think that helps you have more informed decisions and facilitate better discussions.
Yeah, it's great to get like that data to measure success. But I think, having that human aspect and just asking for real feedback on how it went is really important as well. So Xanthi, how would you measure success then with an implementation?
Well, measuring success is easy. If the client gives you one of these, or perhaps one of these, then I'd say you've got success. No, all jokes aside, I'm glad you laughed, Dean. The whole point of planning is to ensure you meet your key milestones. So if you don't meet one of your milestones, you will know right away that you are not meeting success, as you're not meeting the expectations of the implementation. And you need to then take control, reassess, devise a plan, communicate an action plan to get that back on track. And implementation is poorly managed. If you get to the end of the implementation, you have no idea it was unsuccessful. So I guess the overarching measure of success for an implementation would be on time, under budget, and delivery as the customer expects based on the agreement set in the scope.
Awesome. I don't know if that was a hint for any former clients to send you a bottle of wine if they haven't already, but we will provide Xanthe's address at the end of the webinar just in case. I think that's a great way to finish things up, but I'll shoot one last question at you both. Quick fire question. What are your top tips for a successful technology implementation? I'll let Dean start.
I think my top tip, and that's been a reiterating kind of theme for my answers, is involving people often and early. I think that's really important, and making your staff feel empowered, and rather than kind of shoving something on them from top down. So I think involving people at the beginning and kind of letting them kind of have some autonomy and ownership. I think that's really important.
Awesome. And Xanthe?
Yeah, I have to agree with Dean there. So plan early and communicate often. Also identify and control your risks. I also believe strongly in reward and recognising those who are supporting and making the change. So your change champions, essentially. I think another top tip would be gather feedback for lessons learnt when closing out your implementation. So don't forget the implementation is just really the beginning of the relationship with your client, so as a whole business. And probably best tip of all, celebrate the success. So this could be in the form of taking the client to lunch or coffee, team announcement. I think, Dean, you also mentioned previously, and recognition of success of those within the team who have contributed to the success. So really important.
Nice. I'm going to add to that because from a marketing perspective, we're all about showing the benefits. So I think a good tip is during the communication process is to show the benefits of that system, because I think that's something that you really need to show your employees to get them on board. So that's amazing. Thank you both for your insights today. It's been really fun sharing your experiences and contemplating opening a bottle of wine at 11 o'clock in the morning. So before we go into questions, I just want to let everybody know I'm going to pop a poll up on the screen at the moment. So if you are keen to hear more about KeyPay or EmployeeConnect, then it's your chance to just let us know now. And if anybody has any questions, then shoot them through.
Yeah, we're excited to answer questions, so don't be shy, guys.
We've got the polls going crazy now, so we're waiting. Don't be shy, guys. Any questions, send them through. All right, I think maybe there aren't any questions, so we might just close it up here. But thank you everybody for joining us today. I hope you have found some useful information from this, and we'll be in touch with you guys very soon to share the recording of the webinar. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.